since I paid for the microphone, I just want to ask the first question. I guess really for any thoughts anybody has. Why is the Biden administration doing this? There's people have said, well, it's importing voters or there's money involved or whatever. I mean, what are your thoughts about why this is happening? If Todd, maybe you could take a first shot at that.
I can take a first shot at it. The book in chapter 4, chapter called "The New Theologians," describes how a cabal of politically fringe migrant advocate organizations were able to ascend to real power with their ideas with the Biden election in the White House, and took control of the immigration portfolio and still have control of that immigration portfolio to this day. And why I say that they're a fringe cabal or group is that their ideology holds that we're in a borderless world, that they have ideas about how no immigrant is illegal, that the U.S. immigration enforcement system is akin to the Jim Crow laws, that it's immoral, that detention is immoral, that deportation is immoral, and that these have to be done away with. And if we can't do away with it by law, we'll just, now that we're in power, we're going to systematically ignore every law on the books for immigration control. Why they want to do that is, I think, partly to do with just the gratification of finally having power to implement these ideas. The book describes who they are. It names names and describes how they ascended to power and where their ideology comes from. But I think it's also important to note that the mainstream, traditional Democratic coalition positions have never countenanced anything like this. The Barack Obamas, the Clintons, even Bernie Sanders up until 2016 were, like Barack Obama was, when he was in office, would say, hey, I'm not a king. I can't just ignore immigration law. I mean, my job, my duty requires that I deport people. It's the law. But in this administration, people were able to ascend into positions of authority in the White House, in the State Department, political appointees in all the DHS agencies that have been systematically decoupling the administration's duty to enforce the law from what's happening on the border, and this is what's enticed everybody to get in. I also speculate that when you have a mass migration crisis of this volume, of this incredible volume, that the migrant advocacy industrial complex from which these people emerged and came into authority in the White House profits by the hundreds of millions of dollars a year from federal contracts. And when they're not profiting from federal contracts to move those numbers in, they are retail fundraising, with the cute little baby and the little kids and pictures and video of their certain death that they're fleeing. Certain death is the narrative. That, there's money to be made. Everybody is cashing in on this. And I'm a cynical journalist who believes that, money might also be a significant factor in having policies like this.
So doing well by doing good, I think is.
I guess so.
Charlotte, any thoughts on sort of what's driving the administration to do these kind of things?
I don't really have anything to add from Todd's.
Okay, Chuck?
Defer to Todd.
I've always believed that you shouldn't ascribe to malice what can be more easily explained by stupidity. And at the beginning, when I first started covering immigration, I saw that the the legal immigration pathway was so broken and so difficult and so costly that it forced a lot of people to come illegally. And the Democrats just did, in order to save face, would say, well, of course, yeah, well, it's okay. Nobody's illegal. And then I started to learn about there's more than one way for these people to vote. I mean, they don't have to grant them the right to go to the ballot box in order for them to vote in the United States. Many things get apportioned based on mere numbers, and it doesn't matter if those numbers are legal or illegal. And so one of the things we saw, especially during the Trump administration, and that not because of the Trump administration, but because the census of 2020 was coming up, was that the left was pushing people toward these sanctuary cities. You've noticed a change in this, and I want to talk about this. We saw people coming, we saw CNN and MSNBC airing what amounted to be infomercials in Latin America in Spanish saying, here is how to come to the United States illegally, and here is a list of cities that will welcome you with open arms. You can find those articles and videos online even to this day. And they named these sanctuary cities. These are the places you want to go if you come here illegally. And it was kind of hard to wrap your brain around, like, why would they be advertising for these people to come to their cities when we know that it's expensive for them to host illegal migrants in their cities? It raises the crime rate. It raises, I mean, I remember like in Charlotte, North Carolina, where 88% at one point of the crime that was being responded to by the police there was the perpetrators turned out to be illegal migrants. And so it's very costly. Why would they encourage that? Well, then you think about the way that apportionment works. The simple number of bodies in a place counts toward apportionment. And here, due to some great work done by some people here at Center for Immigration Studies, they figured out that the Democrats figured that they could pick up to 4 seats in Congress because of simple apportionment. That's a way that illegal migrants actually end up voting just by their presence. Okay. Now, what's the change that we've seen since the 2020 census is over now? Now there's not as much incentive for them to try to pack illegals into these sanctuary cities. And now when the Texas governor sends people to New York or sends people to Washington, D.C., the mayors of those cities really complain about it. They don't want those people there anymore. Now they want to send them to red states, send them somewhere else, anywhere except for our city. And so I think that is sort of proof of concept of one of the reasons why they want to do it.
I think we have time for a question, maybe 2 if they're short from the audience. Yeah.
I was just going to say, we've talked a lot about the impact on the borders and the suffering of the migrants, and these things really obviously matter. Can anyone speak to maybe some of the broader impacts on American society of a growth of 2 to 3 million in the illegal immigrant population in a short period? So, for example, we spend $15,000 per student in the United States. So if you had 1 million kids, it's $15 billion. What does that maybe mean for schools in some places? And at a time we struggle to fund schools, or we have a record number of working age people out of the labor force right now. So maybe that's helping us ignore that problem and helping to keep, and real wages haven't grown, to keep pace with inflation, particularly for working class people. So I was wondering if you could speak to any of those issues, sort of maybe the interior impacts of this, more run of the mill, other than the very important issues of crime and social disorder and so forth.
Todd, you have a whole chapter on a particular school district that's been affected by this.
Right, I can take that. One of the central characteristics of this mass migration event is that the demographics skew to children, families, because those were the demographics that were exempted from Title 42 immediately from day one. And so you had this tremendous number of, I mentioned 300,000 unaccompanied minors, and you saw the immigrants up on the screen, saying, yeah, if I have a child, I know I can get in. And those children have to go to school. In the book, it's hard to estimate how many came in, but I think I have something on the order of 1.3 to 2.6 million children, I think, have entered the country. And one of the obvious places where that's going to strike an impact is going to be on school districts, public school districts immediately. That is undoubtedly happening across the nation. What that translates into, and I do have in the final chapter, I showcase a small rural school district in East Texas that was swamped by over 100,000 illegal immigrants who piled into the local school district and forced nonstop annual votes for bond elections, for bonds to expand the physical facilities and to buy vast farms of portable classrooms and to pay for ESL teachers and ESL curriculum. That's a really extreme case study. It's actually a true happening case study in one small place that changed the nature of everything. And I believe that is happening at school districts across from coast to coast throughout the interior, bond elections, portable classrooms, ESL teachers, all sorts of other kinds of problems inside those school districts. That's not answering the overall labor question, but I think that's an obvious first impact for what is happening what's happened in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think let's take one last question.
Yeah, Neil Monroe from Breitbart. Can you guys
Hold the mic in front of you.
Yeah, can you guys tell me where you see the federal money popping up along the immigration trail? What groups does it fund? What construction can we see on video? What bus lines does it operate?
I mean, I can start with that, but so the United Nations, different components of the United Nations. Chuck mentioned IOM. It's also UNHCR and UNICEF.
WFP and all that, yeah.
Yeah, all of them are involved in this thing. I recently wrote about a budget document. It was too late. It came out before too late to include in the book, but the United Nations is looking at 2023, 2024 at spending $1.7 billion on aid and assistance along the migrant trails. 450 million of that is supposed to go for direct cash assistance. That means in the form of the debit cards that we see up and down the trail from South America all the way up to Reynosa, Mexico, for vouchers that are to pay for bus tickets for long range transportation of families north, to pay for lodging at hotels and hostels, youth hostels, and to pay for medical, pharmaceutical care, doctors, everything that you would need to stay on the trail and keep moving and to actually help to be moved north. 450 million this year, and another 380, I think, for next year, million. So there is an infrastructure down there. I've seen it. I've talked to the migrants, the immigrants who are, they've showed me their cards, told me how much they get. The UN does not deny this. They've explained and defended it as something that is a humanitarian, coming out of a humanitarian impulse. The UN money also is going to fund operations such as legal training for asylum. They hold huge seminars educating thousands and thousands of people about what their rights are for once they reach the southern border or through Mexico. One operation in Mexico is designed to provide psychologists to unearth repressed memories of persecution so that they have this all together. By the time they reach the southern border, they're very involved. It's very intricately intertwined with the trails.
We've even seen them step between Mexican federal police and the migrants to keep the migrants from being detained on the Guatemala-Mexico border and hold off until the migrants run, and then they block. These are actual, agents of OIM that are out there assisting with this. One other thing that I just wanted to point out, because it's just kind of mind-boggling, on the Colombian side of the Darien Gap, the OIM and the UN are passing out tons of condoms. And that's because there are rape gangs in the Darien that are raping virtually all the women that come through there. And they're basically telling these women, you're probably going to get raped in there. So here's a condom you can give to your rapist in order so that you don't catch any diseases or anything like that. And Ben Berkwam and Oscar Blue, when they went through a couple weeks ago, they found tons of used condoms in the jungle on the trail as they were walking north. So this is unbelievable that the United States is actually funding birth control for the rapists down there. And I could go on and on, but we can talk more.
One last thing about the cost, Charlotte. Where you are, I remember reading, I think Todd has talked about this or you've written about it, some of the schools have to build walls now around the property because of all of the flow of these gotaways and smugglers coming through the community.
Yeah, where I live, the school is on one of the main roads that splits off into two smuggling roads come off that. And so the school spent $60,000 on giant boulders all along that road because there's so many high-speed chases along there and bailouts. I don't know if you know what a bailout is, but the driver stops and everyone flees. And then they have had to build fences around the school as well. And that school goes into, the school superintendent told me not so long ago that it's not uncommon to go into a lockdown at least once a week and sometimes several times a day just because of the smuggling activity going past. So
this is a cost on top of the ESL and extra schools that Todd has talked about in that school district he described. This is actually security, essentially, in places that are in the way of the smuggling routes, an extra cost. So let's end it there. I want to thank all the panelists, Todd Bensman and Charlotte Cuthbertson and Chuck Holton. The book, Overrun, is on all your favorite places to buy a book, Amazon and elsewhere. And this panel will be on our website as well for people. It's recorded so people can watch it later. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. And we will try to get the sales number of the book as high up as we can. Thank you, Todd.
thank you.